Morning, and welcome to Litmus Test. Today, I had thought about several different ideas for this video, but I've decided to settle on physical and chemical changes because that's really important to understanding a lot of where we're going to go with chemistry, and we already have a good start on understanding some of it. So let's dive right in, and then from there we're going to start seeing things like chemical reactions and formulas, and then we can start talking about stuff like that. But let's start with the physical and chemical changes, and the best place to start with here is by talking about the phase changes from last week. So last time, we had gone all the way over here, and we'd looked at some phase changes involving lava, stone, and ice. Alright, again, let's take another look at these. We've got some water, some ice, etc. If we lay down some lava, we note that the lava flows into the water and it freezes into stone. And we also talked about how we can get different versions of that by letting this process happen differently. Boop. That might work. We'll see. This one. There we go. I didn't really want the obsidian, that's the problem. But we saw this phase change from the obsidian, or from the lava to the obsidian and the cobblestone, and if we let this sit around long enough, right here, we'll also notice a phase change from the ice back into water. These are examples of physical changes. I've been using the word phase change because that was the vocabulary we introduced last time. They are physical changes. The substance isn't changing, just the state of matter, or the form that it's in. So we have this lava, and the lava is the same substance as this cobblestone, stone, and obsidian. It's all some form of silicon dioxide as mixed in with all sorts of other stuff. Real life stone there's a lot of different types of stone that are all made of different stuff, different things. But in Minecraft, it's all basically, these are just three forms of lava, or if you count the lava itself. Then we have the ice and the water, and there are mods and there are environments. If we go up to an actual tundra environment where water will freeze into ice, generally speaking, we expect most ice blocks to, melt when exposed to a heat source. Hint, hint. I want to start melting here. Huh? Ice? Want to go? Well, that's another example of a physical change. The ice is still water, and the water is still ice. There it goes. The ice will melt given enough time and enough, heat, etc. And it's still ice. It's still water. So, physical change. Let's go back to the house and look at some other physical changes. And we'll talk about some chemical changes because this gets into crafting, and when it comes to Minecraft, crafting physical chemical changes gets a bit odd. So let's start. We'll pack this away. And I'm going to start with the simplest, which is just this oak wood. Now, actually, hold on. Make a prediction. What do you think this oak wood is? A physical or chemical change? Keep it in your head. Let's start with iron. I'll show you why I'm starting with iron in a moment. If I take this iron, I can break it up into iron nuggets. I get 9 iron nuggets. I can't take the iron nuggets and break them down anymore because, Minecraft. But if I had a grinder, I could grind those down into dusts. And then I could take the dust and turn it back into something else. We can see that if we look at recipes for iron nuggets, we can use it to make nuggets and compasses, etc. There are things we can do with it. Likewise, there's lots of stuff we can do with this iron, but if we just look at the crusher part, we notice that we can crush it down into some form of dust. Woohoo! There's another form of dust. And we can take that dust and make it back into iron, just like we can take this nugget, or these nuggets, and make them back into an iron ingot. Likewise, we can take this iron and make it into a block of iron, and turn it back into iron ingots, and back into nuggets. These nuggets, this ingot, and the blocks all represent physical changes. These are all things that are easily converted back and forth between one form and another. And we notice the same goes for certain other things as well. Like gold does the same thing. Gold will turn into a block. Gold will also turn into nuggets, and these go back and forth. We can make them go back and forth, and it never becomes something that isn't gold, right? We can't turn the iron into gold, which also brings up a good point about elements. You cannot, using physical changes, turn iron into gold. You can't turn iron into, wood or anything else. Iron's just iron. So let's come back to the wood. On the one hand, we've just spent a lot of time talking about phase changes, that wood, as long as it stays the same substance, this should be a physical change. But with the iron and gold, I spent a lot of time talking about how a physical change can be reversed, and you can go backwards. And here's where it gets a little weird. A physical change is always a change where the substance stays the same, but the form changes. So, strictly speaking, changing wood into planks is a physical change, even though there's no way to turn the planks back into oak wood. It just doesn't happen. You can make all sorts of stuff. We can make vertical planks, we can make sticks, we can make a pressure plate, we can make a button. And given enough planks, we can do other things, like we can make stairs. Not that I prepared enough planks to make stairs, but you know. Some mods even have a wooden boot. But we can make a crafting table, but we can't make it back into a log. Nonetheless, we call this a physical change because it's still oak wood. Oak wood planks, oak wood. And this parallels real life in a sense that there are physical changes that you can't easily undo. If I chop up oak wood trees into lumber in real life, you can't take the lumber and put it back into a functioning tree. If you take all of the lumber pieces and the sawdust and the bark, you could maybe assemble it to look like a tree, but it wouldn't exactly be a tree. It wouldn't just go back together again. Nonetheless, we still call that a physical change because it is still oak wood. So what about these sticks? Physical change. It's, again, you can't turn them back into planks. You can turn them into mulch, apparently. You can't turn them back into planks. You can turn them into ladders. You can turn them into fences. You can do other things with them, but you can't turn them back into planks. But it's still a physical change because the substance hasn't changed. It's still wood, presumably oak. Looking at this, another thing, we have this hay bale, which goes back to the same idea that the gold and iron we're using, in that I can put 9 of these wheats together, or hay, to get a bale, and go back and forth. And again, you can see that these are roughly equivalent. But in this case, we can go back and forth, because a hay bale is nothing more than just bundling the wheat together. So that's another physical change. So we've looked at a bunch of physical changes. What about chemical changes? Well, a chemical change here might be something like this, where we take a stick and some iron and we make an iron sword. This is absolutely positively not the same thing as these things individually. An iron sword is not the same as a stick, and it is not the same as just iron. There's a stick in there somewhere. Likewise, we could make a golden shovel. And again, this is not the same thing as this. There's both sticks and gold inside this golden shovel. This is a new item. This is a new substance. It contains gold, and it contains sticks, but they are stuck together in a way that if I do this, not only is there no way to get them, break them apart, but this is no longer gold and it is no longer stick. It is a bit of both, and it is its own thing. It has its own properties. And when we talk about a physical or chemical change, probably the most important parts of that are A, is the substance staying the same? Is this still wood? And B, is it containing the same properties. So we look at this gold, and this gold has certain properties. We can use it with sticks to craft shovels and hoes and pickaxes and axes and swords and etc. I can't do that with a shovel. I just can't. But I can do things with the shovel that I cannot do with gold in survival mode. I can, till the ground with the shovel. I can't do that with gold. Yeah, you can break dirt, but not as easily. So all of a sudden the properties are different. The things I can do with it and the way things work are different. Generally speaking, in a physical change, physical properties will stay the same. Not always, but sometimes, but not always. It depends on the nature of the change. In a phase change, they don't. But if you're just cutting something apart, then they should. For example, each piece of this fence here, this piece, this piece, this piece, should all have the same density as this log. That shouldn't change because we cut it apart. But obviously if we were to melt it, which you can't melt wood, but if you were to melt it, the density and state of matter would change. Chemically speaking, it's still wood. So we would say that melting or cutting is a physical change. But if we were to craft something, like if we craft the sticks and planks into a fence, then we would consider that, in this case, still a physical change, but if we craft this into a shovel, a chemical change. And this is, as we wrap up for this video, I want to make a good point here about the limitations of Minecraft to explain things as limitations of analogy. Keep in mind that a fence has distinctly different properties than non-fences, than those woodens and sticks, right? This fence has very different properties from planks, very different properties from sticks, and in the Minecraft sense, this is basically a chemical change. This fence is no longer these things, and we're going to use that idea to make connections and make analogies going forward, that in some ways, Minecraft crafting is all chemical changes, because this is no longer the same substance and has very different properties. In some ways, it's still a physical change because it's still wood, and it still burns. So in that sense, we can say, oh, well, it's just a physical change, and there are mods which let you take it back and forth. But putting that aside, physical changes keep the substance the same, even if it changes form or shape. Chemical changes change the substance. Physical changes are sometimes, but not always, reversible. Chemical changes are often never reversible. We can't take the golden shovel back. Physical changes will sometimes change physical properties, but not chemical properties. All of these will burn, as will the fence. Chemical changes change the properties, the chemical properties and the physical properties. This golden shovel does not burn. Well, it burns the same way a stick burns, but it doesn't burn the same way that these planks burn. So keep that in mind about physical and chemical changes, and when we pick it up next time, we're going to look at what this crafting means and look at chemical formulas and atoms and molecules, very loosely speaking. So until next time, stay safe and don't catch on fire.